Hello, good evening, and a very warm welcome back to Summit Seashore Birding Adventures. I realise I've been off-grid now for about 6 months, and that's because, like many of you, I also have to work full-time. But during that time, I have been gathering content to put together for today's episode, and it's taken that long to actually get it all together, so I hope that you enjoy it. There heard I naught but the seething sea, ice-cold wave. A while a song-swan came to charm me, and gannets pother, and wimbrels trills for the laughter of men. Kittiwakes singing instead of mead. Storms there, the stacks thrashed, there answered them the tern with icy feathers. Full oft the eagle wailed round, spray-feathered. My attempted poetry rendition is part of a much longer verse known as The Seafarer, found within the Exeter book, which dates back to the 10th century or even earlier. It's considered one of the earliest known manuscripts of English literature, and is housed within Exeter Cathedral. There are many translations of this verse, but the text that I'm referring to was translated by that section was translated by our own James Fisher, a man who dedicated his life to ornithology and co-authored with Roger Tory Peterson one of my favourite books, Wild America. Anyway, this I hope has set the mood for what's to come. So one of my favourite logos of all time is surprisingly not a bird. It's a stag, and you'll find this on the label of a bottle of Hind brandy. Now, for those of you who are curious, I would highly recommend looking up the history connected with this delightful cognac, as it has a wonderful story wrapped all around it. However, the reason I've brought this to your attention is because of its significance and its meaning. That is to always look back and remember where you came from. So with that in mind, this episode is somewhat different in that we'll be putting down our binoculars and taking a walk back in time through the pages of history, some 360 years. Here we begin our journey, meeting some of the most influential and revolutionary naturalists of their time. Now, these extraordinary, diligent and visionary pioneers laid down the foundation of knowledge that brought clarity and created a system that allowed us to categorise, record, protect and understand the natural world. So over the next hour or so, and I'm going to split this episode into 2 parts, we will be meeting John Ray, Francis Willughby, Carl Linnaeus, Gilbert White, Charles Darwin, Alfred Newton, John Clare, and a host of very significant characters, places and moments that have all played their part in this astonishing ornithological history. Now, to give some context and keep us informed about where we are as we make our way along, I've created this timeline that we can refer to occasionally. Now, as you're scanning over this, I'm sure that you'll see a very British North American bias, but that is not me being exclusive. I simply can't fit everything on one slide, and this really just acts as a reference to help us navigate our journey. So what has always run parallel with my own birding adventures is a passion for history, and that interest very much equates to the same feelings I get when I'm out in the field, and I'm sure it's the same for you, and that is of research, exploration, adventure and discovery. My inspiration for this episode comes from reading the incredible and influential books by Tim Birkhead, a professor at the University of Sheffield, a teacher of animal behaviour, the history of science and a fellow of the Royal Society. He has spent over 50 years researching guillemots or common murre on the island of Skoma off the Pembrokeshire coast in Wales, but his work has obviously taken him all over the world. Some of his books include titles such as Birds and Us, The Wisdom of Birds, Bird Sense, The Most Perfect Thing, Inside and Outside of an Egg, and The Wonderful Mr. Willughby, and is currently, or actually I believe he's finished, working on a book on the Great Auk. Now, each one of these outstanding pieces of work take you on a journey with the author as if you were stood right next to him, and patiently he points out things, sometimes quite intricate and difficult subjects, in such a way that even if you don't know a wren from a wryneck, you'll feel included, captivated, and understand the lessons and significance of what he is teaching us. For me personally, I'm sure for many others, Professor Birkhead has brought the story of John Ray and Francis Willughby to the forefront of our minds. This in itself has sent me on my own journey of exploration to learn more about these much revered men, which is now morphed into a hunger for our ornithological past. Professor Birkhead paid tribute to John Ray when he wrote his book The Wisdom of Birds, referring to the wisdom of God, written by John Ray in 1691. Here I pay tribute to Professor Birkhead with the title of this episode, Birding Wisdom. Now, this won't be just a selection of plagiarised photos and regurgitated Wikipedia facts. We will visit manor houses and grand halls, country cottages, museums, the homes of poets, churches, cathedrals, societies, libraries, colleges, royal parks, the Tower of London, and probably a good few pubs. So for us, our story begins in a small church cemetery in the rural village of Black Notley in the county of Essex. The day I visited St Peter and St Paul's Church, the weather was on my side, which was nice, and what I was looking for was an obelisk. The original text is sadly illegible now, but fortunately a plaque removes any doubt about who is remembered here, who is John Ray. I was fortunate enough to get chatting with a lady who after a while informed me that both her father and grandfather lived in the cottage where John Ray was born, and kindly pointed me in the right direction, literally a 5-minute walk. And as you can see here, the old cottage is set up nicely to inform us of its history and heritage. So for those of you who make the pilgrimage to pay your respects to the father of natural history, this is well worth a visit. Outside the Braintree District Museum, which is about a 10-minute drive from Black Notley, is a wonderful bronze statue of John Ray. Now, this was originally unveiled by David Bellamy in the main town in 1986, but relocated in 1995 to its present position. Inside there is a small area dedicated to Ray, which actually has a copy of his Historia Plantarum on display. Now, close by, I couldn't resist popping my head into the Braintree Town Hall to see if there was any reference to him there. Unfortunately, the council chambers were in use that day, which was a shame, as there is a series of commemorative fresco paintings created in 1930 around the vaulted ceilings, including one of Ray. However, there are some modern tapestries hanging in the foyer from 2000, and one does show Ray here along with some text. Now, John Ray was born in the village of Black Notley in 1627, the youngest of three, the son of a blacksmith, and his mother was a herbologist. He was fortunate to be raised in a loving family and learn the skills from both his mother and his father. It was here he fell in love with the local wildlife, both flora and fauna, and was particularly enamoured by the wild flowers meadows in the springtime. By the time he was 10, Ray started his formal education at the Jesus Chapel at St Michael's Church in Braintree. He remained here until he was 16, walking to school every day through the countryside and honing his skills, taking note of his surroundings. His absolute dedication to his studies didn't go unnoticed, revealing his methodical approach, perfect handwriting and impressive ability to retain information. There was no mistaking that John Ray was a highly intelligent boy, and between his parents, his headmaster Mr Love, the rectors at St Peter and St Paul's, and the rector Samuel Collins at the St Michael's, his future was directed to Cambridge. Collins had encouraged setting up charities and scholarship for worthy students to study at Cambridge, and Thomas Hobbes was a wealthy businessman who gave this bequest. Now, I'm sure this must have been both exciting and scary, moving from the warmth and safety of a loving family, but John Ray was a young man of strength and principle, and applied himself accordingly to his scholarly studies. He remained at St Catherine Hall for just over 2 years before transferring to Trinity College. Here at Trinity College he developed his skills in Latin, Greek and Hebrew, and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in 1648 and became a Fellow in 1649. 2 years later, as a Major Fellow, he was elevated to the position of lecturer in mathematics and Greek, and it was here he first met Francis Willughby. Francis Willughby was born at Middleton Hall in Warwickshire, and the only child of Francis and Cassandra Willughby. The Willoughbys were affluent gentry and traced their descent here in England back to the 13th century. When of age, Francis attended Bishop's Vessey's Grammar School in Sutton Coldfield before finally moving on to Trinity College. Now, Middleton Hall sits in 42 acres of peaceful Warwickshire countryside with a history dating back to the Norman Conquest. One of its earlier residents was Hugh de Gronmil, a Norman lord who fought alongside William the Conqueror at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. Part of the estate at one time was leased by Knights Templar and was also owned by Lord Baldwin de Freville II, a soldier who took part in the 100 Years' War and who was held in high esteem by Edward of Woodstock, the Black Prince, commander of the vanguard at the Battle of Crecy and son of Edward III. The Willughby family were in residence at Middleton Hall from around 1418 until it was sold in the 1920s, and their family connections include royal lineage to Lady Jane Grey and Princess Diana Spencer. Sadly, Middleton Hall was allowed to fall into serious decay in the latter part of the 20th century. However, after the derelict building was rediscovered by a group of ramblers, things began to change. By the early 1980s, a trust was set up to restore and protect this national treasure. Now, as you can see, it has been lovingly transformed by the trust and many dedicated volunteers. Now, my visit to Middleton Hall luckily coincided with our Living History UK event day. The reenactment group were depicting Lord Brooke's regiment of foot and their part during the English Civil War. I learned about many things from food preparation, battle tactics, the making of musket balls, preparation of the musket, the use of pikemen during the conflict, and what the musket sounded like when fired. The egg collection within the Willughby room at Middleton are not Francis Willughby's. These are, for the most part, were taken in the early 20th century, roughly 40 odd years prior to the 1954 Countryside Act, which since then protects the nests of wild birds. Though Middleton Hall was the ancestral home of the Willoughbys, Wollerton Hall was the seat of the family and sits on a high piece of ground in the county of Nottinghamshire. It was built between 1580 and 1588 by Sir Francis Willughby using Ancaster stone, paid for with coal from Wollerton pits owned by Sir Francis. It, like Middleton Hall, was sold in 1925 to Nottingham Council and in 1926 was reopened as a museum. When I visited Willughby Hall, I took part in a behind-the-scenes tour where our group gained access to the cellars, Tudor kitchens, prospect room and a fantastic panoramic balcony view of the estate. From here I noticed the many exterior carvings of owls, which makes sense as they are the emblem of the Willughby family. After talking to our tour leader and explaining I was doing some research, she allowed me special access to the Middleton Library, which housed an extensive collection of natural history books. At one time, Francis Willoughby's adult children lived at Wollerton Hall after their father died in order to put distance between themselves and their mother's new husband, Josiah Child, the governor of the East India Company. Being a strict and powerful man, he had little time or patience for his stepchildren. It was here that they later recovered their father's collections and paperwork, much of which is now safely archived at the University of Nottingham. When Willughby and Ray met at Trinity College, it triggered one of the most remarkable relationships and friendships in natural history. Though their contrasting backgrounds and personalities seemed an unlikely match, they actually complemented each other greatly, resulting in a lifelong bond and friendship. During the early days of their journey, Willughby and a couple of the students joined and helped Ray on his quest around Cambridge to learn about the county flora. This evolved into the Cambridge Flora, the first ever catalogue of an English county. The ball was now really rolling, and over the next few years, Ray and Willughby and their close friends headed further afield, including London, Hampshire, Dorset, Bardsey Island off the north coast of Wales, Cornwall, and the Farne Islands in Northumberland, to name a few. I visited Bardsey Island back in August 2014, the blue star on the map representing Cambridge. I was fortunate to go out with the warden, checking some of the island's Manx shearwater nesting burrows, and as always, being so close to these truly oceanic birds was a real privilege. Referring to Willoughby's ornithology, I noticed that there was no mention of them seeing or recording this species on their trip to Bardsey. However, they did visit the Isle of Man, the Manx shearwater being named after this island, and under the name Puffinus alglorum, Willughby gives a full description. They also travelled down to Cornwall and as far as Land's End, and it was on these trips to Wales and Cornwall where Willughby also began collecting language samples to translate local dialect. This here is Porthgwara, about 4.5 miles south of Land's End, and a fantastic site for sea watching during the late summer and autumn. And I'm not sure if they ever got here, but it gives you an idea of the general landscape they would have experienced. However, in Willoughby's ornithology under the name guillemot, known by the Cornish back then as kidor, there is reference to this bird at Godrevy Lighthouse, just off the coast of St Ives. During our trip in 2021, we also noted European storm petrel and Manx shearwater. Equally as impressive as the other two locations mentioned were their ventures out to the remote Farne Islands off the north-east coast of Northumberland, again referenced within the pages of Willughby's ornithology. These outstanding seabird sanctuaries were incredibly significant, giving these pioneers of the natural sciences a real opportunity to study and take samples of many species. The conditions and logistics for travel then were tough, and I can't help but be in awe of their dedication. Not only did they have to navigate their way to each destination with minimal information, they then had to collect samples of fish, plant life, reptiles, amphibians and birds. Even though exhausted, their evenings would have been spent writing up extensive field notes, recording details such as behaviour, habitat, structure, plumage and biometrics. These were rigorously documented, and autopsies would have been carried out under the most basic of conditions. It was here, however, on these explorations of the UK that Willughby and Ray came to the conclusion that it was time for a change. The unquestionable word of Aristotle in regard to the natural world was no longer definitive. This was a new era and the pivotal moment that replaced hypotheses with facts, or to quote the Royal Society's motto, nullius in verba, take no one's word for it. Both Ray and Willughby would have obviously been well aware of the dramatic change within the country during their time together. On the 30th of May 1660, on his 30th birthday, Charles II rode back into London to much applause. The return of the King, the return of monarchy and the end of the strict Puritan Republic under Oliver Cromwell. This day for many years was commemorated as a public holiday in England, Wales and Ireland, referred to as Oak Apple Day. Unfortunately, it was abolished in 1859, but is still recognised and commemorated in some communities and by the Chelsea pensioners. The oak apple refers to the tree at Boscobel Woods in Shropshire, where the king hid whilst being pursued by the parliamentarian soldiers after the Battle of Worcester in 1651. For me personally, this time period is also very important as it represents the beginnings of my own regiment, the Queen's Regiment, now known as the Princess of Wales's Royal Regiment, but whose lineage goes back to 1661, where it was formed up on Putney Heath as the Tangier Regiment. When Catherine of Braganza, the Infanta of Portugal, married Charles II, she brought with her the port of Tangier as part of her dowry, hence the name. Now, there were many things to be grateful about with the return of the King, such as the reopening of inns and theatres and churches, the celebration of Christmas and Easter, and the re-establishment of balance of power with Parliament. However, there were also expectations to conform, one of which completely altered the direction of Ray's life forever. In 1662, the Act of Uniformity was passed, an act that Ray could not and would not agree to signing, essentially losing him his position as a lecturer at Cambridge. Fortunately, Willughby, with his money and position, was able to offer Ray accommodation at Middleton Hall, and with finances taken care of, they got down to exploration and discovery. In this slide we see Charles II to the right, to the left a painting of Catherine of Braganza at our regimental HQ at the Tower of London, the Queen of the Queen's Regiment, and in the centre Charles II in the grounds of the Royal Hospital Chelsea, something he founded in 1682 as a retreat for veterans. And for any of you Pink Floyd fans out there, you can just about make out Battersea Power Station in the background. Ironically, some of the first patients at Chelsea were soldiers who fought at the Battle of Sedgemoor, the last pitched battle on English soil during the Monmouth Rebellion. Though the Duke of Monmouth, Charles II's illegitimate son, was taken prisoner, he was shown no mercy by his uncle, James II, and was subsequently executed at Tower Hill. Now, if Ray and Willughby's UK research efforts weren't impressive enough, then their sheer perseverance during their European exploration must speak volumes about their character. Throughout their travels, they not only collected samples for examination, but visited universities, libraries, bird markets, unfamiliar habitats, and spoke to rural people, gleaning information from localised knowledge. These unique observations and experiences became an invaluable contribution towards their ideas of what constituted a real species and where it sat within a classification system. Unbelievably, tragedy struck just when their story and journey seemed still in its infancy. In 1672, and at the age of just 36, Francis Willughby lost his battle of ill health and died of pleurisy. Like John Ray, Willughby was laid to rest close to his place of birth and family home at St John the Baptist Church in Middleton. This was shocking for all involved, not least for his wife Emma, who in many ways blamed the death of her husband on John Ray. Francis Willughby had left in his will a stipend of £60 a year for Ray and asked that he would tutor his children. This he did, though, as you can imagine, the atmosphere wasn't great within the household. John Ray, of course, was not to blame. Francis Willughby lived the life he wanted and was very much his own man. John Ray thought the world of his friend, and to such an extent that he spent the next 4 years producing the first authoritative book on birds, and as I've mentioned throughout this talk, it was dedicated to his friend. Ray putting Willughby's notes in order and in one place in the Ornithology of Francis Willughby. Fortunately, the financial burden of this monumental book was taken care of by Emma Willughby, who wanted her husband's story to be told. Ray eventually married and had children and settled back into Essex, where he continued writing many books until he passed away in 1705. Now, to bring the story of Ray and Willughby to a conclusion, I travelled up to Cambridge, the starting point of all their adventures and a fitting place for us to bid them farewell. It was a glorious day, and I felt very grateful of the warm weather as I made my way through the town, then across the historical grounds of Trinity College. I was here to see an original copy of the 1678 edition of the Ornithology, though to do this you can't just stroll up to the Wren Library and ask to see it. There are a couple of hoops to jump through first, including submitting a letter of introduction from an academic who must vouch for your character. If accepted, you will then be required to make an appointment with the librarian. My special thanks goes out to my dear friend Dr. Catherine Moore for vouching for me and making this happen. On arrival, I checked in with the librarian, a very friendly man, and who, after booking me in, guided me to the reading table at the end of the library and kindly gave me permission to take a few photos. Here I spent 3 wonderful hours poring over this original of Willughby's birds, and it was fun just choosing a bird from the index and looking it up and see what the wonderful Mr. Willughby had noticed. Particular attention was given to the honey buzzard, as this species was first described by Francis Willughby. I also read about some of the trapping techniques used by the bird catchers of old. Here I noticed very similar methods that we still use today, such as the potter trap, cannon net and Heligoland style trapping system. I have since bought a facsimile copy of this book, which I refer to all the time. Now, I'm old enough and wise enough now to remember to stop and pause in these moments, almost pinch myself and become completely aware of my surroundings. And on this day, I did exactly that. I was sat in the Wren Library at Trinity College, Cambridge, an amazingly historical building designed by the same man who created St Paul's Cathedral, the cathedral that now houses my own regiment's colours. I was finally reading the book that I had become so fond of even before I'd seen it. To my right and overshadowing the reader's table was a huge statue of Lord Byron. The glass cabinets surrounding the room were filled with classics beyond belief. First edition Shakespeare, first edition Winnie the Pooh with original notes by A.A. Milne. Top right in this slide is Sir Isaac Newton's Notebook. Below, a first edition of Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, and above the scribbled notes by one of the greatest poets of all, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the author behind such classics as The Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Kubla Khan. To be honest, I had hoped in the back of my mind, that is, even before embarking on my first trip out to Black Notley, that this day would happen and that this moment would represent the grand finale of my Ray and Willughby quest. And of course, in many ways it did. It was truly magical. And if the Roubiliac busts of both Willughby and Ray at the entrance of the library don't spell out that this was meant to be, then nothing will. However, there was one more unforeseen event that has surpassed even my own ridiculous nostalgic daydreaming. Nestled deep within the rolling hills and rural landscape of North Yorkshire is Birdsall House, home to the Willughby family, and I had managed to book a tour through historical houses to visit this property, specifically to see the only portrait of Francis Willughby. Now, as you can imagine, this wonderful house has a rich and interesting history and has been the home of the Willoughbys since 1729. Now, not long before the tour day, I received an email from Professor Birkhead. I had been in contact with him regarding a proposed dedication to John Ray at the church at Black Notley, and he was aware I was doing some research and my trip to Birdsall. Anyway, the email simply said, do you mind if I join you on the tour? Now, they say don't ever meet your heroes, and in reality it rarely happens, but on this occasion they couldn't have been more wrong. This day has simply gone down as one of the most special and memorable of my birding life. On arrival, I met with Tim, and almost immediately he presented me with a copy of Virtuosa by Nature, the scientific words of Francis Willughby. As we made our way into the dining room for coffee, we met with Cara Willughby, who greeted Tim like an old family friend, and of course that's exactly what he is. He then introduced me to Cara, and you couldn't have met a more kind and friendly lady. He explained I was here on research project, and was the Willughby egg collection still here, and if possible could we see it, to which Cara simply just smiled and said of course. Now, during my own research, I had read The Wonderful Mr. Willughby by Professor Birkhead, and in it he tells the story of how he rediscovered Willughby's egg collection whilst visiting Lord Middleton. This egg collection is thought to be the oldest in the world, and I had no idea I would actually have an opportunity to see it. During our tour, Cara Willughby took the small group from room to room, telling us about the history of the family, which was absolutely fascinating. And occasionally she would hand the floor to Professor Birkhead, and he would walk us through some of the history of the ornithology. The famous cabinet that I had read about and that had felt so distant from my own world and reality was actually now in view. Here Tim talked us through how he felt when he first came across this historical treasure, and to quote from his book, "During my research career I've had a few eureka moments, but this was one of the best." Here we see a selection of curiosities that Willughby had collected during his travels. And now here we see Francis Willughby's egg collection. We know that they're his for a couple of reasons. Firstly, he specifically had this cabinet handmade for his collections, a fact that Ray had commented on previously. And secondly, the handwriting on the eggs has been analysed. A clear example is on the snipe egg, showing the letter P with its characteristic backward and forward sweep, a familiar trait of Willughby's style. The bottom left photo has not been posed. Cara Willughby kindly grabbed my phone from me to capture this moment. The Willughby family made me feel so very welcome during my visit, inviting us to stay for lunch after the tour was over. Tim, as I already knew, was a complete gentleman and went out of his way to make this visit very special. It was just simply the greatest of days.